That lake was my private sanctuary, hidden deep behind a thick pine forest. Only I knew the way to get there. For years, it had been my escape from the noise of the world. I never even bothered bringing my kayak back home. I always left it leaning against a massive oak tree by the shore. It was heavy, so I'd just cover it with a tarp, enough to protect it from the weather and from animals. One evening, I stayed at the lake longer than usual. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I was about to head home when something caught my eye at the far side of the lake. A man, someone I had never seen before, was standing at the water's edge. He was holding a large metal barrel and slowly tipping it over. I froze. A dark, thick, reddish liquid poured out, staining the crystal clear water. My heart slammed in my chest. I shouted across the lake, "Hey, what are you doing?" The man jerked his head toward me, eyes wide with fear. Then, without a word, he dropped the barrel and bolted into the forest. The liquid kept spreading, leaving a terrible scar across the surface of the water. I felt sick. I paddled furiously back to shore, dragging my kayak out of the water. That's when I heard it, branches snapping in the trees behind me. I didn't dare turn around. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I grabbed my fishing gear and walked as fast as I could toward the road. The entire walk home, I kept looking over my shoulder, convinced someone was following me. Even when I finally got back to the house, the fear didn't leave me. I locked every door and window and called the police, along with the Department of Environmental Protection. Later that night, while I was heating up dinner, a loud knock rattled the front door. I froze. At that hour, it couldn't be a delivery or a friendly visit. The knock came again, harder this time. Then, a raspy voice drifted in from the living room window. "I know you saw me at the lake," it said. "I just want to explain." I stepped back, my chest tightening. That wasn't a request. It was a threat. He had followed me home. I shouted for him to leave, warning that I'd call the police. But his voice only grew colder. "Sir, I'll explain everything if you just open the door." I repeated my threat, and finally, his voice disappeared. I immediately called the police again, reporting that the man from the lake was now outside my house. I double-checked every lock, every window, then sat on the couch, heart pounding. Deep down, I knew the truth. This man wasn't just dumping waste into the lake. He was dangerous. My fear turned into sheer terror at midnight. I heard the sound of breaking glass downstairs. He was inside my home. I grabbed my Glock from the nightstand, hands trembling. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. I hid by the bedroom door, gun raised. The doorknob turned slowly. His silhouette filled the doorway. I flicked on the light, my gun aimed squarely at him. "Get down now!" I screamed. He lifted his hands. A small knife glinted under the light. His eyes locked on mine, emotionless. Then he said in a disturbingly calm voice, "I'll leave." He turned and ran down the stairs. I shouted after him, but he was already gone. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. Minutes later, the police arrived. They found the shattered living room window, shards of glass scattered across the floor. Together, we returned to the lake, but the barrel was gone. He had already moved it. I gave the best description I could. Short, bearded, glasses. I spent the rest of the night clutching my pistol, unable to sleep. The next morning, my brothers came to help fix the window. One of them even stayed with me for a few days. I still didn't know what had been in that barrel, but my gut told me it was something far worse than chemicals. Maybe it was human remains. Why else would someone track me to my home, break inside, and risk everything just to silence me? Unless he had something truly horrifying to hide. That night taught me something I'll never forget. Sometimes danger comes from the most unexpected places, And when your instincts scream at you to run, listen, because it might be the only thing that saves your life. For my family, fishing has never just been a hobby. It's a ritual, something passed down from generation to generation. Ever since I could walk, I was brought to the lake by the older men in my family. My grandfather, my father, and my uncles all called me the next in line. I wore that title with pride. My father, Robert, and my uncle Samuel were the most devoted. Our house was filled with fishing gear. Rods, nets, tackle boxes, life vests stacked in corners. Anyone who visited knew instantly we spent more time on the water than on land. But this story's about my father, Robert, a man who wasn't shaken by much. He was a war veteran, strong, silent, steady. Yet whenever he spoke of this experience, something in him changed. His voice trembled. His eyes seemed distant. He hated talking about it. But at family gatherings, someone always pushed him to retell it. One day, my father went fishing with Samuel and 3 of their closest friends, Kevin, Brian, and Tony. Their destination was a legendary lake, whispered to hold giant bass and pike. It was hidden deep in the wilderness, requiring hours by boat to even reach it. The place was untouched, swallowed by thick forest. The trip started like any other. Their boat cut through a thin layer of morning fog as the water lay flat, calm, and still. Hours of fishing followed, laughter, jokes, the rhythmic splash of bait hitting the water. Monty, the group's clown, was already drunk before noon, which only made everyone laugh harder. But as the sun dipped, a strange fog began to roll in. My father called it the swallowing fog. It wasn't normal mist. It pressed down on them, heavy, suffocating. Rich, the most experienced of the group, admitted he'd never seen anything like it. Matthew tried steering them out, but the boat nearly scraped against the tree line. They gave up, realizing they'd have to spend the night on the boat. But my father had an important job waiting the next day, so he decided to try for cell service on land. Kevin and Brian went with him. The 3 climbed out with only their phone flashlights and a single flare gun. Inside the forest, the fog thickened. They moved carefully, every step deliberate. Then, a sound echoed, a hollow metallic clank. It repeated, irregular but steady. My father swore it wasn't an animal. It was man-made. The noise surrounded them, shifting from one direction to another. Kevin whispered for them to kill their lights. "Don't let them know where we are." When the beams died, they were swallowed in absolute black. The sound stopped. What replaced it was worse. A silence so dense it pressed against their chests. Then, a sharp snap of a branch, close, too close. A scream tore through the night, high-pitched, raw, and filled with agony. It was the kind of scream that didn't sound human anymore. Primitive. My father froze. His heart hammered. And then, footsteps. Running. Coming straight toward them. In a panic, he fired the flare behind them. The woods exploded in red light, shadows stretching like monsters. For just a second, they saw them. 10 figures, faces hidden, dressed in strange clothing stitched from leather, bone, and skin. Some clutched crude spears. Another scream erupted in the distance as the flare burned out, and darkness swallowed them once more. They ran, branches tearing at their arms, lungs burning. My father fired another flare into the sky, this time as a signal for Samuel. The light revealed the shoreline. Figures stood there, 15 or more, silent, still, watching the boat. Samuel didn't hesitate. He gunned the motor. The boat roared forward, cutting through the water. No one looked back. Not until the shoreline had vanished behind the fog. That night, none of them slept. They took turns keeping watch, eyes wide, hands shaking. By morning, they were gone. And Tony, drunk through it all, remembered nothing. My father swore he'd never return to that lake, and I believe him. Every time I think of his story, I wonder, who screamed in those woods? Who were those people on the shore? The truth is, we'll never know. Ever since I was a kid, I've had this habit of getting obsessed with one hobby for an entire year, before eventually moving on to something else. The summer of 2023 was my fishing year. My family owns an old beach house on the edge of a quiet lake, complete with a small boat. To me and my friends, that place was paradise, an escape from everything else in life. By October 2023, I decided to spend a weekend there with two of my closest friends, Ben and Alex. The plan was simple: catch the striped bass that run heavy in the fall. But our little boat was being repaired, so the only option was fishing from the shore. On the first day, we tried our luck from a small dock in the cove. It was disappointing. Only Ben managed to pull in a tiny bass. The rest of us got nothing. Frustrated, we agreed to try again later that night, but this time at a hidden beach only Ben knew about. To get there, we had to hike down a narrow trail surrounded by thick woods. By the time the sun went down, that trail felt darker, heavier, almost suffocating. We parked in a small gravel lot at the end of the road. Ben reminded us to carry everything at once. We weren't planning to come back until morning. So we grabbed folding chairs, a speaker, and 2 coolers, one for fish, the other for food and beer. 5 minutes later, we stepped out onto a wide, empty shoreline. Not a soul in sight. Perfect. We set our rods in the sand with little metal holders. Ben even clipped a tiny bell onto his line, so it would ring if something hit his bait. 2 hours passed. We were finally landing a few decent-sized fish. Spirits were high, music was blasting, and for a moment it felt like the night was ours. But then, Alex froze. He quickly shut the speaker off. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. He swore he heard someone yelling from far away. Just a short call like "hey" or "yo." We laughed it off at first, told him he must have misheard, but from that moment on, the mood shifted. The silence felt heavier. Minutes later, as I was casting my line, I noticed something. A dark figure, standing not too far from us, just watching. "What are you doing out here?" the man asked, his voice low and gravelly. Ben answered quickly, "Fishing." The man only nodded, eyes fixed on us, on our rods, on the waves, and he didn't say another word. The 3 of us exchanged nervous glances. The air felt colder. My chest tightened as the seconds dragged on. The tension finally broke when Ben's bell rang. "Fish on!" I shouted. I ran to his rod, reeled in a small striper, and turned back, smiling. But the man was gone. Just gone. Swallowed by the dark. We checked our gear, making sure nothing was missing, then sat back down. None of us said it out loud, but we all felt it. The night wasn't fun anymore. We turned the music off, stayed quiet, kept fishing, but always watching the tree line. A while later, I stared out toward the horizon. That's when I heard it. Faint at first, then unmistakable. The sound of a car alarm. My car alarm. My heart dropped. There were no other vehicles in that lot, no houses, no cabins, no reason for any other alarm. We panicked, dropped everything, and sprinted back through the trail. When we reached the lot, my chest went cold. Both tires slashed. A window shattered. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called the police. The dispatcher asked if we had any idea who did it. I told her about the man on the beach, and while I was still explaining, the sound of a branch snapping deep in the woods. All 3 of us froze. My stomach turned to ice. We didn't wait. We ran, 200 meters down the road, and crouched behind the trees, barely breathing, while the operator told us to stay put. 10 minutes felt like an eternity. But eventually 2 squad cars rolled in, sirens lighting up the night. We ran back. Officers were already sweeping the area. Some of our gear was missing, my wallet, Ben's tackle, and some cash. But what made my blood run cold was what they did find. A large hunting knife, lying in the dirt by our car. I told the officers everything. They said we'd done the right thing by hiding. Then one of them looked me straight in the eye and said, "He probably wasn't just trying to rob you." That sentence stuck with me. The police gave us a ride back to the beach house. That night, none of us slept. We just sat in silence, staring at the floor, too shaken to even speak. The next morning, Alex borrowed a friend's car to get us home. Mine had to be towed to a repair shop. To this day, that night is the scariest moment of my life. What was supposed to be a fun fishing trip turned into a nightmare, one that cost me more than money. The police never called me back, which means whoever that man was, he's still out there. Needless to say, I quit fishing after that, and I've never gone back to the beach house. Fishing has always been a part of me, just like the name my parents gave me. Now I'm almost 65, and I can say I've cast my line thousands of times in my life. The house is quiet, too quiet. My children are grown, with families of their own, and the silence that fills these rooms is something I still haven't gotten used to. Sometimes, I miss the noise. I miss the chaos. But life keeps moving forward. I'm no longer the kind of fisherman who enjoys the crowd. Lately, I prefer going out alone. For someone like me, Vermont is paradise. The lakes here are among the finest in the country, and I've made it my mission to explore them all. In mid-April, just after the ice had melted, I decided to find a place more remote than usual. I stumbled upon a small hidden lake near Stowe, secluded and forgotten. No one would be there. Perfect. I left home an hour before sunrise, lowered my kayak from the car roof, and glided silently across the water just as dawn began to break. Out in the center of the lake, I set up for bass fishing. A 7-foot graphite bait casting rod, 15-pound braided line, and my trusted black feather jig, perfect for largemouth. But just before I cast the line, something caught my eye. Movement across the lake. At first, I thought it was another fisherman, but curiosity, it pushed me to lift my binoculars. What I saw froze me. 3 figures dressed entirely in black, hoods covering their faces, were digging into the ground near the shoreline. At first, I thought they were burying something, but no. They were pulling objects out of the hole, and one by one, throwing them into the lake. A cold, instinctive dread crawled up my spine. Whoever they weren't safe. I waited, gripping my paddle, until they vanished into the trees. Only then did I slowly drift toward the spot. I tried searching for whatever they'd thrown in, but I couldn't find a thing. Then I remembered. I had a depth checker in my car. So I paddled back, grabbed it, and returned to the water. Sweat trickled down my back as I scanned the lake bed. At first, it was nothing but silt and mud. Then, something solid. Metal. I marked the spot and switched to the largest hook I owned. My hands were trembling slightly as I lowered the line. Then, it caught. I pulled, slowly, carefully, every nerve in my body on edge. And when it finally surfaced, my blood ran cold. Hanging from the end of my line was a 9mm handgun. Those men, they had thrown a weapon into the lake. Suddenly, the stillness around me felt dangerous, wrong. I lifted the gun into the kayak without touching it and paddled for shore as fast as I could. The moment I reached land, I called the police. They arrived quickly, combing through the lake and dredging up even more items. I insisted on knowing what they found. A keychain, foreign coins from different countries, and most disturbing of all, a locket, its photograph inside blurred and faded by time. The officers promised to contact me if anything connected to an active case. They never did. A few nights later, well past midnight, I heard voices outside my house. That's his car. I'm sure of it. Footsteps circled the yard. Slow, deliberate, then silence. I reported it to the police, but nothing came of it. And now, even years later, the questions still haunt me. Why did they dig those things up, only to throw them into the lake? Were they watching me, even now? This was the strangest and most terrifying experience of my life.